Hi listeners, Jason here. PHS Con 2024 was nothing short of amazing. We had 400 community members come together, both in person and online, to rapidly progress our understanding and practice of psychological health and safety in workplaces worldwide. Over the 2 days, we laughed together, we were inspired, and we learnt. If you missed out, don't worry, on-demand access to content is now available at phscon.com. Plans are already underway for a bigger and better PHS Con back in Sydney for 2025. So save the date for next year when we return to a larger venue on June 19th and 20th. Now, on to this episode.
From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. With workplace mental health becoming a safety prerogative, this is the source of information on psychological injury prevention and health promotion.
Hi, and welcome to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. My name is Jason and I'm one of the hosts of the show. The aim of the podcast is to rapidly increase the knowledge and application of psychological health and safety in workplaces worldwide. To help with this, we have regular guests from around the world who are leading the way in this important area. But before I introduce our guest and topic for today, allow me to introduce my co-host, Joelle Mitchell. How are you today, Joelle?
I am still recovering from our Sydney trip, Jason.
Yeah, now this is the second podcast we're recording today. This one will come out before the one we recorded earlier. So you're still tired, and you're probably more tired now because it's the end of the day and we have recorded one podcast already today.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah, continuity be damned for our listeners who are listening to them
sorry,
sequentially.
Listeners. Yeah, I told my good story already.
Oh, you don't have any more stories since, you've done pickup today. You've gone home. You didn't see a snake on the side of the...
I didn't see a snake on the side of the road. No, it's raining. Driving in Perth when there's rain is always a extreme sport. So I'm glad that I just got here in time to be able to record.
Yeah, and I have a feeling this is going to be probably one of our longest podcast episodes ever because there's just so much to unpack. So we should probably invite our guest in straight away. Okay. So she is an accomplished organisational psychologist who has operated her own consultancy, worked in the UK for Jaguar Land Rover, and more recently at South Eastern Sydney Local Health District. She is chair for the New South Wales APS College of Organisational Psychologists and has just come off chairing the inaugural Psych Health and Safety Conference. A very warm welcome to the podcast, our friend Liz Payne.
Hey, you two. Nice to see you again. It feels like quite an eternity since the conference, but I kind of still feeling what Joelle said. I'm pretty exhausted myself, but what a great conference, hey?
Yeah, and big thanks to you, Liz, for making it the success that it was. You had a big part to play in that, which we'll unpack in this podcast episode. But thank you for backing it up so quickly after the conference so that we could get out some of our key reflections today.
I think I need another iPad for this one, Jason.
we'll see what we can do in terms of remuneration. Really, we thought it'd be great to be able to cover reflections from you today. You did a cheeky shout out to me while you were chairing the conference, saying that with all of the 200 plus guests that we've had on the podcast, we've never had you. And, I thought I'd better actually do something about that. So, great to have you on so quickly after the very pointed feedback that you provided to us, Liz.
Well, I've been told sometimes you have to ask for what you want, really, Jason. I've been kind of waiting patiently in the wings, listening to 200 and odd, podcasts. So, sometimes you need to ask for what you want.
Yeah, just manifest it, right?
Yeah. It was on, what is it, your vision board? I had it on a vision board. It was kind of...
But if anyone knows my wife, she'll be able to tell you that I'm not very good at reading signals. So you have to be very blatant. So Liz did it the best way possible, just saying, "Hey, Jace, isn't it about time?" So we're doing it. We're catching up.
And after that, you could hardly say no when Jason asked you to do this recap episode with us, right?
Well, do you know what? I did actually think again, because it's kind of like the emails have backed up. I was like, oh man, I should sometimes just keep my mouth quiet. But no, it is nice to be back. It feels like it was such a great experience, but then it feels like such a long time ago. And I think we're probably wrapping up this time last week. So it's great to kind of digest it all.
So Liz, For listeners who don't know you, can you tell us about your professional career, please?
Thank you, Joelle. I'll kind of do the bits that are most relevant. I think I'm getting to the stage in my career where I could go on and on and on. But so obviously not from Australia by birth. A few clues on that. Grew up in the UK. Went to the University of Manchester where I studied psychology as my undergrad and honours, as you do it combined over there. Relevance for this podcast is that James Reason was one of the lecturers over there. So I know how, like, you don't realise it at the time when you're 18 and just, struggling to get out of bed. But I remember hearing all about his human error book in terms of trains and automobiles. So look, the whole experience at Manchester University, fabulous people, fabulous grounding. Left with a good degree, didn't know much about much, and ended up with a career in recruitment, which was, young, naive psychology undergraduates think that they're going to go and help these nice people get a job. Then you kind of come into quite a different world if you know much about the world of recruitment. Then I got my chance to come over to Australia, so recruitment did me that favour. And a few years later, I went back to university, went back to UNSW, studied to get my master's in organisational psychology there. Again, another good selection of lecturers. I learnt from Joelle. She's currently at Macquarie Uni. I don't know if you know Jo. She's pretty fabulous as well in this field, but she's still in the profession. And after getting out of university life, my first career, well, not my first career, but my first big job in the field was with a company called Hay Group. I don't know if you know Hay Group, not their Hayes Recruitment, more the management consultancy that became part of Corn Ferry. So that gave me a really good grounding in everything to do with leadership, culture. Again, they had fabulous psychologists working in there. Paul Power from Melbourne, he was one of the best ones working in there. Got all that softer stuff. So we had leadership, like leadership was core, but the methodologies were really well researched, which is one of the main reasons why I joined them. Did a lot in terms of climate and culture and what that means. But then I also did that harder stuff in terms of job evaluation, job analysis, remuneration, so you get to understand jobs and industries. Every industry you can imagine, like universities, mining companies, not-for-profits, you name it. After 5 years there, set up, as you said, Jason, my own small company, Collective Strength. And I know there wasn't a huge interest in well-being prior till obviously year 2000. So my consulting work shifted, as many people's did, when COVID was on. So I went from doing leadership work to getting us to do the old resilience workshops. Like that kept me busy. A lot of virtual online resilience workshops during the lockdowns. But then since then it's shifted into the more meaty side of workplace mental health. So I've done quite a challenging root cause analysis in the higher education sector from a psychosocial risk point of view. Jaguar Land Rover, I set up a governance framework to protect the employees and the organisation in relation to mental health first aid. So there's obviously a massive amount of risk about implementing that. So I set up the governance framework for that. And currently in health, I am working from a culture side of things in terms of psychosocial risk management. So that stays within health, safety and wellbeing in my current organisation, but I partner with that part of the organisation to look at control measures, to work on specific projects to say, how can we actually help support this? So lots of experience, many industries. It's just interesting. I like change. You can probably guess from that. Lots of variety, nice people to work with, lots of challenging problems to solve.
And add to that resume, chairing the inaugural Psych, Health and Safety Conference.
Oh, yes, of course. And I'm actually the chair of the ACT in New South Wales College of Org Psychs as well, because Well, look, frankly, I don't think they could get anyone else. But
Yeah, you clearly were absent during a meeting when they did the election. Yeah, that's generally what happens.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, but no. So that's a good thing as well, supporting the org site community. And I did do the conference, which was a real highlight. Honestly, it was a real highlight.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, Liz. Obviously, I think from hearing about your background, people would have an understanding now a bit more about why we selected you as our inaugural board chair. And great to have, like you say, with your connection with the APS College of Org Psychs, New South Wales ACT, to have their chair to also chair our conference because of the great need for our discipline within the area of work that we work in. But I guess to open it up, there's so many moments, I guess, over the 2 days. What did you enjoy most, though, about being the chair of the conference itself?
Look, it's like you say, the whole experience was fabulous. I think anyone was there. I hope it was part of the experience online as well. But the entire 2 days were just fabulous. I did feel it in a complete privilege. As soon as I saw the agenda that you sent me, I absolutely felt that it was such a privilege to be asked to do that chair position, because it wasn't just one session. It was session after session after session after session. There wasn't any, I think you said one of the feedback said that there was no sections where you could just kind of close your eyes or something like that.
Or walk out. Yeah, because usually, in a conference you'd go, oh, I'm going to skip out of this one. I'm not that interested. But yeah, the feedback was there was no sessions like that. They felt obliged to sit in every single session.
Yeah, so the lineup was fabulous, and everyone kind of came to the party. There wasn't there was no dull sessions, and when I saw that, I was like, okay, usually when you're a chair of something, there's bits where you're kind of trying to keep people awake, but there was none of that. The atmosphere in the room, I hope it was the same virtually, but there was such. It was such supportive. I knew that as soon as I got there was people on my table, Tracy from I think Anstow, and they just wanted me to do a good job. It was that real sense of belonging. I really felt that people were smiling at me, and I think we've all still been a bit starved of that in-room experience where you connect to people and support people. And I really did feel that everyone wanted everyone to be at the best. And I don't think I felt something like that in a conference. It wasn't a judgmental environment. There was multidisciplines, there was lawyers, and everyone was working towards that same goal. So it was a special atmosphere, I would say, where everyone played the part. Obviously, your team set it all up magnificently, but everyone was just there and really committed to making it work.
Yeah, and I think part of that goes down to you nailing the brief. I think you mentioned we had some conversations, obviously, in preparation for the conference, and you're interested in the vibe that we're going for. And I think for those who regularly listen to the podcast, they'd understand that Joelle and I take the content and the subject matter seriously, but we don't take ourselves so seriously. And your level of self-deprecation definitely matched Joelle's and mine. And I think that went down really well. It made people feel at ease, right? And go, well, look, we're going to have some fun here while we actually, discuss sometimes some pretty heavy topics, which we'll unpack today. But yeah, your sense of humor and, the ease that you put people at was terrific.
Thank you. He likes to it's a tough one taking a compliment, but thank you. No, I think I've obviously been a consultant for many years. I'm in-house now, which we talked about on the conference, that it is tough to be in-house. But I think to succeed as a consultant, I think Dave Burrows said it, you have to be yourself. And I have my early years as a consultant, you're kind of trying to imitate the more formal, polished consultant. And then I kind of realised, look, that's just not going to work, Liz. It's just not going to work. I'm trying to use, my fancy words and stuff. So I kind of, you're at your best when you are yourself, aren't you? So, I'm quite happy with that, really. But thank you.
So, from our end and in bringing together the lineup, we do have a lot of fantastic clients that we work with, and we're really fortunate to get to witness the work that they're doing and really see how they're progressing and how they're maturing in this space. And we were really pleased that we were able to bring Rio Tinto, Qantas, Westpac, Horizon, Lifeblood, and Origin Energy, and that they were all willing to share some of the work that they've been doing in this space. And of course, David Burrows and Kat Page also did a fantastic job, as they always do. They're both very charismatic people, and they're always fun to listen to, as well as being very intelligent and insightful. We're not going to go into those particular sessions in this podcast, just for lack of time, really. We do have an episode that we did record with Dave and with Kat previously. So if people do want to listen to those, they can go back and do that. So, Jason, over to you.
Yeah. Nice
Sorry,
question.
there was no question in there.
Sure. I stitched you up. Great.
Yeah, you sure did. Thank you.
So, we were, though, Liz, very fortunate to do live podcast recordings with both Michael Leiter and Christina Maslach, people who have decades of experience in researching burnout before it was the hot topic that it is today. So I guess in brief, what did you take away from those combined sessions?
Well, I think first of all, for you to get both of them at the conference was an absolute treat. They're real pioneers. I think for Michael, I think the longer you listen to him, I've not really listened to that podcast you recorded, but the more you listen to him, the more you just heard more and more humility and wisdom. Like, it was just incredible. Like, it was just like there's just more and more and more. It wasn't just like he's got his one thing to say. So that was fabulous. And Christina sharing the story about how the concept of burnout came out, and it was quite accidental because there wasn't an office ready for her. So that real storytelling was incredible. Do you know the funny thing about Christina? You had that conversation. I think with some of your case study guests around the trying to get the catchy phrases, and as much as everyone was saying like the depth of work that Christina's done, and everyone did write down that gross, the get rid of the simple, what is it? The simple stuff.
No, the stupid stuff.
Yeah, so and then I think you said, Joelle, at that time, is like everyone's just writing that down, and we'd had a big debate about whether these things are useful or not, and everyone goes away with the gross written on the pages. But I can't do the theories justice, but the breakdown of from Michael, the breakdown of what is burnout and what isn't. So I obviously work in health now, and you can see people are just absolutely exhausted, like fundamentally exhausted. And then you can see people who are cynical. Not always the same group of individuals. And then there's also that self-efficacy in terms of which he related to belonging, and I'm doing a lot of work in terms of diversity, inclusion and belonging in my current role. So linking all of that together, it's just a pulling apart of these concepts and just making it so normal and real for us. I look at blown away by both of those sessions.
Yeah, both. Yeah, like you say, it was amazing to get both. It was a pity that Christina, due to family reasons, couldn't make it in person. She did say that she'd maybe come in person one time, so we'll definitely keep that invitation open for Christina. But you're right, I saw everyone, and there was so many people taking photos and sharing on LinkedIn that GROSS acronym. But we often talk about hindrance demands, right? It's those things that cause it deliver very little in terms of benefits and just makes people's lives difficult at work. And it was very great way of considering those. You don't always need to add things, and so there's always been this benefits culture I find in workplace mental health. We need to give people more in order to address mental health, whereas what she was saying was the opposite. Get rid of stupid stuff that actually serves no purpose, and actually that will have a big benefit on people's mental health.
Yeah, I agree. And look, I work in health now, as I've said. There's so much in there. Like, there is so much. And there's projects to get rid of the stupid stuff. But, geez, it's exhausting when it's not part of your fundamental purpose or reason to be somewhere. So I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, and I was a little bit concerned, going into it about how we would go with Christina doing it virtual. But hey, like everything over the 2 days, the technology just worked, and I found that she was terrific, and was just as engaging as Michael, even though she was virtual. So it has left the door open for us to consider other virtual guests who can't make it in person for whatever reason for subsequent conferences.
It would have been nice if you and I could have seen her face while we were talking to her, though.
Yeah, we'll talk to the AV guys next time to make sure there's a fallback monitor. There's we've literally got pages of ways that we can improve the conference, and some of them are more for us than for the people participating. But yes, it would have been nice to see her rather than just having the screens to the side and we had to kind of crane our neck to get a glimpse.
Well, it worked for the rest of us. So I did wonder how you were going. I was wondering if you could see her on the screen in front of you, but you did.
Would have been helpful, Liz.
There you
but
go. Oh,
we seem to have decent chemistry regardless. So yeah.
Yeah, it was fabulous, absolutely fabulous. But yeah, I think people listening to Christina and how the whole concept came about. We talked quite a bit on the conference at different parts about the power of storytelling and how she was saying how it just went from nothing and just these conversations, and then all of a sudden the concept of burnout is coming about, and then to all of a sudden it's becoming part of common knowledge to talk, not necessarily an informed view, but to transition from that to where it is today. Like, just incredible to hear that story.
Yeah, absolutely. A real highlight for both Joelle and myself. And yeah, we'll be looking forward to releasing them as their own special podcast in about 6 months' time. So they'll be the first 2 episodes of 2025.
Oh, wow. Why so long?
Oh, we want to give people, we want to incentivize people to turn up to the conference and not just get all the content released over podcast straight away. Come on. We're trying to pay the bills. These conferences aren't cheap to put on, I can tell you that.
I can imagine. Yeah. I can imagine.
So I know for a lot of people, Dr. I. David Daniels of the Psych, Health and Safety USA podcast fame was absolutely the MVP of the conference. Lots of people really energized by a lot of what he had to say. Why do you think that was the case, Liz?
I was one of those people. I remember reading, how I had the Mentee and it was reading the questions, and the top one, even though it wasn't a question, it said, David Daniels for president, and there was loads of hearts next to it. So, he was an incredible person, and he had a very strong story to tell in terms of the challenges of his diverse background. But he spoke from the heart, but there wasn't any judgment or anger or bitterness about how he's probably been treated, how his family's been treated, how his ancestors have been treated, about the injustice of being in the position that he's in, as a black man in America, where it's still, white male dominated, elder male. But there was no anger, there was no criticism, there was no justice. And I think sometimes that pulls the diversity card down because it puts people off making things more diverse. It can become quite fragmented and argumentative. But from Dr. I. David Daniels, there was just this, again, that humility and at peace with how things are, still a desire to want to change things, but not that aggression that you get or putting other people down. It was like, this is where we're at. And look, he's a good bloke as well at the end of the day, wasn't he? He's very funny, very captivating. So yeah, I'm number one for Dr. I. David Daniels. Great bloke and a great podcast as well.
But he led by example too, right? It wasn't just his words, his actions. So maybe you can let listeners who weren't able to see his actions, let them know what happened.
You're gonna have to jog my memory on that one, Jason.
Oh, really? It was one of
yeah.
Maybe because I was sitting.
The story.
Okay. Well, I was sitting right at the back of the room, and I knew what was going to happen ahead of time. Fortunately, so I could prepare myself emotionally for it. But The story goes that someone actually had, from the conference attending, had actually thought that he was one of the hotel staff. And so he got the idea of, well, actually, let's get all the hotel staff out, the people who've been feeding us, the people who've been cooking our meals out of the kitchen, and let's actually get them in front of the audience and actually let's show some appreciation for the work that they're putting in. And I think that was one of the themes that came out of the conference, right? Often we focus on knowledge workers or people who are, in higher paid roles, and we think about how do we create better work for these people, where the vast majority of people in workplaces worldwide are doing those more labor, blue collar, not knowledge work, right? And often the vast majority of workers worldwide, if we think about the global population of workers, but often we either don't think about them or we think it's too hard in order to change their jobs to make them, less cumbersome, more mentally healthy and health promoting generally. So in terms of leading by example, we know that recognition is a key way that we can foster better outcomes for workers. And, the conference organisers, the conference venue said this has never happened before. Over decades of running conferences, this is a historic conference centre, right? This had never happened before. It was just so incredibly moving to see someone like David go, well, look, I see these people as my peers, and this is an opportunity while I'm out the front here to get everyone to recognise these people. And, I saw tears come to some of the eyes of the people who were receiving that. It was absolutely a phenomenal moment. And I've said to David since, you have demonstrated something so powerful there, and this has to become a mainstay of the conference on day 2. We have to bring everyone out and say thank you again, because it's just such a simple thing, but it was just so incredibly powerful.
Look, I completely agree. And in terms of, it was spontaneous as well, Jason. I know we'd thought about it, but I think that was again the joy of the conference was there was lots of elements of it that were just conceived in the moment or very shortly, and that was one of the really special ones. So yeah, you could do it again. But that spontaneity and being in touch with people, it was a really special. And he also FaceTimed his mum as well, didn't he, over in the States?
They used the Marco Polo app, so he recorded something for his mum. And so, we're definitely bringing back David Daniels for next year. He's definitely on 2025's agenda. He's one of the best, like you say, sometimes diversity and inclusion type speakers can be hit or miss. He nailed it. He's the best speaker I've heard on the topic. We're definitely having him back for next year. And we're bringing some other Psych, Health and Safety podcast royalty as well over in terms of Marianne Baton, and hopefully Kate Field and Peter Kelly can come on a panel as well for next year.
I'll just repeat his key message, because I know that's what. So the key message he was putting forward obviously was in terms of people who are looking at psychosocial hazards and implementing systems, that this is the right stage to incorporate that diverse populations. So many of the systems that are designed, not just psychosocial hazards, but whether it's, training needs, you name it, the diverse populations are added at the end as an afterthought. So what he was encouraging employers to do was to think from the start, okay, well, if we're implementing a psychosocial hazard framework or measurements or system or programs, let's consult with these diverse populations from the start rather than do it as an afterthought when the system's already in place and working effectively for the majority, the white majority as always, and probably those higher level roles. Let's do it. Bring everyone in from the start.
Yeah, and I think that that idea of things being safe for one group and not another group, it can be kind of difficult for people to understand how that could be the case. But while he was talking, I was reminded of a conversation that I'd had with one of our clients, and she had gone to a mining camp on one of their regional sites, and she hadn't been to this particular camp before, and the site safety manager was taking her for a tour around, and I won't repeat word for word what she said to him, but it was essentially that this camp feels quite risky from a sexual assault perspective, and he was absolutely floored. He had never seen the camp in that light before. It hadn't occurred to him that was the case. But looking at it through a woman's eyes, you see a whole different landscape of risk there. And so, you know, for me, those types of stories really do hammer home why that diversity in consultation is so important, to make sure that you are actually capturing that risk that you're maybe not aware of because of whatever reasons it might be.
Look, I'm not a deep diversity expert, but I am responsible for the strategy in our organisation. And as soon as you start delving into that world, you just realise how many lenses you can see the world through. And we do, you know, we all know about biases and stuff, but you don't realise how everything is designed for the majority. And as soon as you start building your lens, you go, wow, 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 wow. So I think, you know, I'm not a deep diversity expert. I think for everyone who's involved in, whether it's psychosocial hazards, culture work, you name it, I think building your lens is a really important thing to do.
Yeah, and on the topic of psych health and safety, consultation is such a key component of that. And I guess putting it into Dave Daniels' talk and why we wanted him there, that's really what we wanted him to demonstrate out. And he did that so well, going, well, if you don't consult well and across all groups, you're going to have gaps. And then there's going to be pockets of people that potentially could be harmed as a result of that. So, yeah, Dave, you're probably going to be listening to this because you're such a psych health and safety nerd and you don't miss anything. So, yeah, thanks again, mate, for participating in the conference. And we're looking forward to having you back. And I believe doing a book signing as well. So, hot tip for people coming along, we'll hopefully have some copies of his book that he'll be signing next conference. But speaking of emotive talks, there was none more emotive than Zagi Kozarov being interviewed by Catherine Dunlop. And look, previously we'd had Catherine Dunlop come on to the podcast and describe the matter, and she did that phenomenally well. So for anyone who isn't across it, go back to Catherine Dunlop's episode. She did such a great job. And she did such a great job that Zagi actually, this is how we connected. She reached out to me and Catherine independently over email saying that she heard the episode and she thought it was just so well considered and was so accurate in how the matter was depicted. And that's how Zagi and I connected. That's how Catherine connected. And so when I started planning this conference, I thought, wow, you know, Zagi changed the law in Australia. Like, it took 12 years of persevering through workers' compensation to get to the High Court to demonstrate that, yes, indeed, her employer should have known better and they did not change the work to protect her mental health. And very definitely she's got lifelong scars from her work at the OPP in Victoria, right? And so it was amazing to hear her very personal story of a lived experience of developing a psych injury, and the most famous in Australia, and will be regularly referred to in legal precedent when people are talked about having a mental injury caused by work. Well, you should know better because of the Kozarov High Court case. But yeah, I'd love some reflections from you, Liz, on that. But that was super emotional. I think most people in the room would be familiar with it, but hearing the perspective of the plaintiff in the case was just so different than reading it or even hearing Catherine talk about it.
Oh, look, it's hard to use words to describe that experience. And I think, and again, I expect it to happen virtually, but I think honoured, humbled to hear Zagi shared so open, like vulnerable beyond vulnerable, wasn't she? Let's face it. Like, she shared her scars, she shared everything with us, and for someone to feel safe enough to do that, look, full credit to Catherine. Like, I was absolutely blown away by Catherine's ability to work with Zagi, and you know, you've got Zagi sharing like a story that shouldn't happen, but we know that it's still happening, and the courage and determination and the self-sacrifice she shared it all with us, and then Catherine so delicately supporting Zagi through that conversation. And then at the meantime, she we had almost like micro body language going on, Catherine and myself, because the session ran over. And we weren't even doing eye movements, but we could see that we were communicating. Do we stop? Do we start? Do we go? Do we cut this off? But look, that was probably one of, I think, I'm not going to say one of, I'd say that's probably the most emotional sharing I've heard on any conference or anything really. You go to a lot of different leadership events and people share their stories, but I don't think I've ever experienced someone sharing a battle they've been through. And the self-sacrifice of I don't think I've ever heard someone be so honest and open and share it like that. It's not a treat. It's a very humbling experience to be in the room with someone sharing something like that so openly. So yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing, right? I don't think there was a dry eye in the room. Everyone was incredibly moved. You could have heard a pin drop. Like, there was about 200 plus people in the room, and it was complete silence. I took a photo at one stage going, this is amazing. I just got to remove myself from the situation for a moment just to capture this moment. Zagi didn't know exactly what she was going to say and how she was going to say it leading into it. And that was kind of problematic for us afterwards because she did go into quite a lot of detail about what she was exposed to while working as a prosecutor for the OPP. And so we had to scramble quite quickly afterwards. We realised, unfortunately, we got some great clinicians in our team who were able to craft some messaging out and get emails out to the delegates to just say, hey, look, what was shared was, very detailed and could be triggering for some people, and here's some places you can help. And Alicia from our team did a great job the next day as well, and just in terms of letting people know that it would be normal to be triggered by that if you've had personal experiences like what Zagi had shared, and again where to get help. But it was definitely not our intention for her to share that much. It was, like you say, incredibly personal what she shared, and very brave of what she shared. But if we'd known beforehand, could we have done it differently? Then hopefully so. But like you say, for the people in the room, I think 98% of people would have been an amazing experience. And for the people who, go into a profession like health and safety or organisational psychology because they want to help people, I think that's what also made it incredibly impactful, going, well, people do this sort of work and we don't want people to be harmed like that, right?
Oh, completely not. Yeah, and that brought the reality of situations, didn't it? And look, I think you handled it really well. Obviously, it wasn't known, but as soon as you get into this type of work, stuff like that comes out. Stuff comes out.
Yeah, for me, I think that the big takeaway from really everything that Zagi was talking about was, what happens when we don't get it right? What are the consequences? And I think, there are still a lot of people out there who are quite dismissive of psychological injury, feel like it shouldn't be a priority or a focus for health and safety people, and that we should really be focusing on the things that kill or seriously injure people. And I think, the messaging that came through really clearly from Zagi was this can be a serious injury because, yeah, that's her career gone, that she can't do that anymore, and she's heartbroken that she can't do it anymore, and she continues to have those PTSD symptoms, and while she can manage it, that's something that she's going to be living with for the rest of her life. So we can't pretend that that's not a serious injury, and we can't pretend that that psychosocial harm isn't sometimes fatal as well. And so yeah, I think it's just a really, in addition to that, I think a really powerful reminder of the importance of storytelling along with good data. We need both to be able to put forward a compelling case for change.
Completely agree. And look, I think that's a word. It's that heartbreaking. She was clearly heartbroken. Nothing. No more words can be better than that. Well, be more apt, I think is the right way to explain it. I think it was a profound experience, and sometimes things need to be profound. Like, every single speaker was fabulous, but then to see the reality of what we're actually talking about was immense. Like, it was nothing short of, okay, this is why we do the work that we do. She's the one, I'm sure there are many others, but that's why we just have to keep going on, because it's just not acceptable. It's just not acceptable.
Yeah. And like the other thing that really struck me was that you can be in such a toxic workplace and have, like, seriously, what she had to do in that role and what she had to witness is not something you'd wish on your worst enemy. But she loved it, right? She loved her job, and she was like had the skill set and the right attitude for that job, and it's just amazing. And this is the thing, right? So we need systems in place to protect people like her, because people will harm themselves because they feel mission orientated, and you see that in healthcare as well, right, Liz, and education and that sort of thing. So just because people are happy doing it or willing to do it doesn't mean that it's good for them as well. And I think that was a powerful reminder from that story as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a key takeaway. I think I opened on day two, and I not so eloquently, but I think it was like people who are doing work similar to what we're doing around psychosocial risk. They're putting themselves in some situations that harm. If you're talking about bullying and harassment, and you're the person in an organisation, and my experience, it is harder when you're the person in the organisation. But if you're the person who is driven to do the right thing and raise these risks, you're putting yourself in a very vulnerable position, often with very powerful people in an organisation. And sometimes that's a very, very, really not nice place to be in. And I know this is happening. Even sometimes the CEO doesn't have the power in organisations. That's not always the reality. But people in this industry managing psychosocial risks can find themselves in a very vulnerable position. And it's that, do I keep fighting? Do I keep fighting? Because I know it's the right thing to do, and I know this is not just. But then when does is anything going to change? And I know people in the room going, I know we've shared experience that people are doing that. So we are putting ourselves at risk doing this profession as well. And then it's like, okay, well, how do we look after each other? I think there's a real risk element in terms of actually doing this work itself.
Yeah, I think, you're not doing yourself justice there, Liz. There's a number of people I saw reflect on LinkedIn how much they valued that commentary from you, because you're right. People who work in helping professions like health and safety and human resources and organisational development, they are like privy to some information that, again, can be really sensitive and can harm them, particularly when you have this, innate sense for justice, or you want to see things done the right way. And that is vicarious trauma, that they're exposed to as well. So how do you care for the carers? I think you articulated it very well, and definitely that message got through to a lot of people who are at the conference.
Thank you. I don't know if we got to an answer to that. I know we talked about support networks, and that was a key theme generally, but even that awareness of, actually, you do need your support, absolutely.
Do you need more psych health and safety in your life? Then head over to the Flourish DX Academy for several free on-demand e-learning courses. If you're an internal professional, follow Flourish DX on Eventbrite to register for any of our free fortnightly interactive webinars. Our flagship professional practice program is also exclusively available for internal professionals. The 12-week course blends theory, applied practice, and interaction with other professionals through live lectures and a monthly community of practice session. Find out more about all these learning opportunities, or inquire about a bespoke in-house training at the Flourish DX Academy. www.45003.org. Now back to this episode.
So we did have, I think, excellent representation from regulatory bodies around Australia. So we had the CEO of Safe Work Australia, Murray Boland, was interviewed by the fantastic Lucy Brogden. As a woman watching that interview, was like, yeah, career goals, this is amazing. The impact that both of these women have had on the policy landscape of Australia is just phenomenal. So, yeah, that was a big highlight for me for sure. And then, I got to moderate my regulator panel with Jim Kelly, who's always a joy to speak to, and Amy Salmon, who is new into her role, but I think we can all agree absolutely knocked it out of the park. And Sally North, who is equally impressive woman, and I think really put forward her positions very concisely and with sufficient moderation, I think, as is appropriate for a regulator. So, it was a fantastic opportunity to be able to facilitate that conversation with them. Liz, any key messages for you from that panel?
The key message in terms of what I heard from them was, they're trying to do the right thing. They're still in a learning position like many other people in this industry, and they know that there's room for improvement. And there was a talk around the inspectors in terms of their knowledge of psychosocial risks. Key message also in terms of work with them. So don't commit to something that you're not realistically going to do, because then that's where more kind of friction might take place. I'd like to hear what you thought in terms of a bit of commentary I had over the 2 days was that there was a lot of fear in the room around the regulators. I don't know if either of you two picked up on that, but there was a lot of fear, and a lot of people were actually attending because there was a bit of fear about what the legislation was saying. It just came to me from a few different people, and I just wondered if either of you two had heard anything on that.
I don't think so. It's not something I see people express concern about, that they don't know what would happen if they got an inspection.
And rightfully so sometimes, because if they haven't started anything.
Yeah, but I think, I mean, for anybody that I've spoken with where they've had an inspection already, it's, it's just an inspection. It's the same as any other inspection. You might get an improvement notice, you might, whatever. And then you just work through it. So, it's not, it's not anything big and scary. It's have your systems in place. Show that you're following your systems. So that message around don't have whiz-bang systems or policies and procedures that say that you're doing the world if you're not actually doing them, because that's where you're going to get more in trouble. You need to be taking practical steps to reduce risk, and that that's what the law says. And so if you can demonstrate that you're doing that, or you've got a process in place that helps you to do that repeatedly, then largely you're going to be okay. And there's always room for improvement, and that's going to be the case. But I don't think that people need to be afraid of the regulators in this space. I think that, what the regulators are consistently expressing is that they do want to work with organisations and help them to be able to meet their obligations. They don't want employers to be failing their employees. They don't want to see people being injured. And so, that they want to do their job as well. But if you're coming at it with an open mind and being willing to collaborate with the regulator as well, that sort of feeds into their decision process around what actions do they actually need to take here in relation to this. If they can see that you're engaged and willing, that's a very different picture for them than somebody who's just putting up barriers and blocking and trying to prevent them being able to do their job. So, I think it's, anytime there's anything new, there's always an element of fear. And I think, it's probably a lot of that will be once people have had an inspection, they'll realise that it's actually not that scary.
Yeah, and that was part of having the three regulators on that panel, so that people could see that these people are normal people. They're there to work with companies rather than against them, because really it's all working together to protect the workers. But also the regulators are very aware of the market maturity in relation to psychosocial risks. They don't expect people to go from doing nothing to having the most comprehensive safety management system for psychosocial overnight. They know it's a process, and that's what continuous improvement is all about. So, like Joelle said, if you're demonstrating that you're willing to do work in this area, and that you're willing to work, if you do get a notice of improvement, or if the regulator says, hey, there's things that really aren't up to scratch here, if you're willing to listen to that and adopt or adapt your practices, then there's nothing to be afraid of. It's only the ones that are doing some very harmful type activities and not willing to move that that you're going to have an issue with.
Yeah. And the one thing I did like from that session as well, and it kind of was a theme from across the conference, was that the solutions don't necessarily need to be like hashtag psychosocial hazards solutions. I think one of your case studies talked about the recruitment process and reducing the time to hire, and then that would actually alleviate workload and job demands. So that's what I actually liked. It can just be practical. It doesn't need to be something different necessarily to what you're doing already, but let's look at what you're doing. Let's look at those key levers. Let's look at the drivers. It doesn't need to be anything kind of new. It doesn't need to be anything like over-engineered, but let's go back to the fundamentals. I think a few people talked about fundamentals and what's in place rather than inventing something new. And I think that did come through quite clearly across the conference.
Yeah, I think fundamentally when we're talking about psychosocial risk, the way that we control that risk is through good people management. And that, reflects through all of the stages of the employee life cycle. And what are those touch points between the business and the employee? And how do we make sure that those touch points are not creating risk or creating unnecessary risk? And then, how do we make sure that our leaders are also equipped to be able to be responsive when they see issues emerging? So yeah, we shouldn't be seeing anything really groundbreaking from a controls perspective. It should all be really very boring stuff, just doing it well.
Joelle, that's my last 20 years doing really boring stuff, but thanks for the summary.
But really, it boils down to basics, like Joelle said, thinking about all those touch points over the employee life cycle. But it's really the regulations are about evidence-based practice, and it really, I keep saying to people, this is not revolutionary. This is Org Psych 101. Before putting in an intervention, understand the baseline, put in your intervention, and then measure to make sure that it actually worked, right? But we see that particularly in the workplace mental health space, and Dave Burrows talked to this, right? There's a lot of solutions looking for a problem to solve, but they're not necessarily the right problem, so they're not going to be effective, and they're not measured. They're just going, well, they were effective in this context. We're going to apply them in a completely different context and just assume the best.
Yeah. And look, I completely agree. I think that was one of the good things that the conference did as well. It kind of demystified, like if you were a novice going into that room, it demystified that you need to do anything new and, fancy, for a want of a better word. Like, you don't need to make things up. You just need to, let's get the basics right. Let's make sure that your leaders are treating people right. Let's make sure we're cutting out bullying and harassment. Let's make sure we've got the good recruitment practices and people aren't overloaded. Michael Leiter talking about, let's talk to the individual, let's talk to the manager, let's facilitate that conversation, let's work at that team level. Obviously, that was a big thing that we didn't talk about earlier about Christina and Michael, but let's work at that team level. So it's not new, and it's not new rocket science. It's like, okay, let's get the basics right. Obviously, there's opportunity for some job design work, which might be new for some organisations, but yeah, if you start with the fundamentals, you'll probably be on the right path.
Yeah, and the examples that you shared there, like reducing the time to hire, like it's so basic, right? But it can have such big ramifications on downstream people's experience of work and work overload. So get the basics right. But I guess one of the most common, a more common scope that we're getting time and time again now from our clients is, hey, can you help us to take stock of all the controls that we've got? Because like you say, there's heaps of controls that already exist, but they're not necessarily mapped to the hazard. So thinking about org design or HR kind of systems, but then thinking about them through a psych health and safety lens, right? And then working out a way of how we're going to evaluate these things. And look, a psychosocial risk assessment when you consult with workers and understand severity, frequency, duration of hazard exposure is only one data point, but there's many other data points that, exist within organisations that would give you an indication of whether there's a problem and whether your controls are effective or not. So again, that's a much more common scope that employers are just asking for, because they don't necessarily have people like yourself, Liz, in-house that have that understanding of how to do that sort of work.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, actually. And again, that's the maturity of understanding of what the control measures are, what the risks are. And again, we talked about culture at the conference, but it's so multifaceted. And that's, again, another thing coming from the conference is, okay, you can control things internally, but there's many other parts of the system external to the organisation that you might not be able to control. I think the higher education case studies panel brought that out. So there's psychosocial hazards coming through that are external to your organisation, and probably the CEO can't influence those. So it's very complex, and it does need that breadth of understanding. And it's very multifaceted. So it's interesting that the thinking's going along that way, because there are many, many controls, but then it's back to systems thinking, isn't it, frankly?
Yeah, and that's where Org Psychs excel. So, as chair of the APS in New South Wales and ACT, I think you should be pointing a lot of the members of the college to this area of work, because it really is Org Psych 101, and it's just, we're so well equipped as a discipline to be able to deal with this. But they need to start thinking, more using that psych health and safety language, if you like, in order to bridge the gap that companies need to bridge.
100%. And as I said earlier, internally, I'm working with an apps, health, safety and wellbeing, who own this, and that's the right place for it to be owned. And so bridging that gap. So I do think Org Psychs do have a great role in this. But then another thing I really liked about the conference was that it was health, safety and wellbeing people. There was lawyers in there was whatever professions, but there was a multidisciplinary approach. And Org Psychs on their own can't solve this one, but Org Psychs who are open, and sometimes that's where Org Psychs fall over, is that they think that they're can do everything themselves. But if you can work with the multidisciplines, then that's what it's needed. And there was a few conversations, weren't there, about, is it owned by HR? Is it owned by HSW? La, 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 la.
It's owned by the executive.
Exactly. It's a whole organisation challenge. And it's the same for any cultural intervention. It needs to be multidisciplinary. It's going to fall over if one group or one individual thinks that they own it. So that was something I really enjoyed about the conference, that there was different views, but it wasn't, it's mine, it's yours. It was like, we have to collaborate.
Yeah, and that came through actually in some of the feedback. A lot of the guys like Kevin Jones, for example, who gets to pretty much every health and safety conference, was like, there's so many people here that I've never seen at a conference before. And I think that was because it brought so many disciplines together. We had HR and people and culture as well, right? We deliberately will be curating content for HR, PNC, and senior leaders in the next conference, because we really need them in the room as well. Like Joelle said, this is owned by the execs, so they need to get their head around it as well and look at how they use those transdisciplinary teams that they've got at their disposal to achieve the goals of psych health and safety. Yeah.
Great, look forward to that one.
If only we can get a chair. So anyway, we'll work on that.
I'll get you a seat.
So I think, for many, and including myself, look, when I started curating the conference and I started thinking about who ideally, should we have here, and obviously Christina and Michael, because of their work on burnout, I was thinking in a dream lineup, that would be amazing, because they're really, if we start at conference one, we really want to outline the problem, and, they were there when we started defining what burnout actually is, right, which is one of the, key outcomes of poorly designed work. And then I started thinking, well, what are the other kind of things that really underpin the work that we do? And, the integrated approach to workplace mental health, from the very start has been the cornerstone of the work that we do. Obviously, we as a company at Flourish DX focus more on the psychosocial risk management, so the prevent harm pillar. But, really that fits within the integrated approach. And so when I started thinking about it very quickly, I recognized that, hey, 2024 is exactly 10 years after Tony LaMontagne, Angela Martin, and Dr. Catherine Page published the first paper on the approach. And I thought, how fitting would it be to have a 10-year anniversary panel with not just, say, Tony or Ange on there, but all three of them together. And so, fortunately, we've had all three of them on our podcast. I like to call them my friends, and was able to reach out to them, and very quickly they got very excited about it, and we're able to come to an agreement to get the three of them on one panel at the same time. I got to moderate that panel, so I was very fortunate. That's what happens when you curate your own conference. You get to put yourself on whatever panel you want. So I was very, like you said, Liz, humbled to be on a panel with those three. I called them the dream team because they were fantastic, and really my job as a moderator on that panel was to get out of the way because these guys are very, very much friends, and you could tell that by the banter that they had together. Much like Joelle and I have our own banter when we do our podcast, but. Yeah, it was just so fun from them. Like you said, Liz, with Michael and Christina in particular, talking about the history of how did these things actually emerge, to hear about how the integrated approach started as a discussion around a kitchen table, and then it has emerged to, not just national best practice, but, very much underpins the models that the World Health Organization and ILO have put forward as international best practice for workplace mental health as well. But I've rambled on there a bit, Liz. What were your key reflections from that panel?
That's all right. I think it was your dream as far as these things go, Jason. And look, you said to me before you started moderating it that you were just going to sit back, and it was just like having a bird's eye view to the kitchen table, really, wasn't it? I think if we could have given them a glass of wine each, that might have, been the only thing missing. But it was just like literally, they were exploring, they were reminiscing, they were, reflecting on where things are today. Being, you could see Tony was very humbled to see that the work that they put together is actually on the slide deck of case studies of the biggest companies around Australia are actually using it, and you can see the humble side of people doing that. Then you can see them exploring ideas for the future. Then you can see Kat and Tony having a bit of the niggly, what do you think about it? And you can see it playing out, and you could imagine it escalating at times. You could see Angela kind of leaving them to it, and then it was like a family, wasn't it? And that I loved was it Angela? I'm getting Angela does work on small businesses, is that right? Yeah. See, I've been a small business owner as well. So that worked for me as well, thinking like that's not, we have the quantities presenting Rios, which is all fabulous, but the challenges of small businesses are very, very, very difficult. And I'm a psychologist, so imagine, the guys in the street here, and how on earth do they kind of deal with this? So I loved her advocacy for small business, but just again, that was. Just being the bird's eye view on that, and just seeing the three of them, and they enjoyed it. They interacted. You could see they enjoyed it, and it was and you could see like the audience were happy. So again, it goes back to that audience were very supportive and enabling, but yeah, it was like a bird's eye view and just listening to one of their conversations at the kitchen table.
Yeah, and I got to say, I was very deliberate in terms of the timing of that. Having that at the end is kind of like the dessert at the end of a main course. And I knew like there'd be a lot of people hanging out for that one, and it was so pleasing to see. I go to a lot of conferences, and so often you see people drop out at the end of the conference, going, "Oh, okay, I won't go to the last couple of sessions. I'll make an early move home." But I really didn't notice that there was a big drop-off for that, and then the regulator panel that followed directly after that. I mean, even Tony got me to change his flight because he wanted to stay on for the regulator panel and hear what they had to say as well. So, it was so good to see people stay right through to the end after a very densely packed, 2 days.
I think if anything, it got more full actually, Jason. I was looking around, I was like, oh gosh, this room's got even busier. So it was a good decision. Like it topped off. Again, it was like there's no time to kind of nip off early and do your shopping or whatever. It was like, okay, no, that was the main event. That was like the dessert, like you say. It was again, in terms of experiences, I don't think conferences generally give you that kind of experience. We had Zagi earlier, we had Catherine, we had Michael, but to get that experience of the three of them talking about how the theory first, the model first came about at the kitchen table, and to see them exploring about, well, what's the next thing we're going to do? Are we going to do this? Are we going to do that? And you can see like the genesis of ideas, like how you never get that at a conference. Like when do you ever get the luxury of actually seeing people who've actually made a difference in the work that we're doing, actually debating things in real time, and not even pretending or not even just telling us the story, but to actually do it? Like seriously, that was first class.
Yeah, so good, and they did such a great job. So kudos to all three of them, who hopefully will listen to this episode and hear our gratitude for what they did contribute. And yeah, I don't know if the three of them have been on a panel probably together for probably 5+ years. Yeah, so it's terrific, right? So yeah.
So, looking ahead, Liz, what would you like to see more of at PHS Con 2025?
I don't know in terms of more of. I think I was absolutely wiped out, weren't you, at the end of that? I think you said
Liz,
delirious.
can I say, yeah, we've got like so many people said it was the best conference they've ever been to, and that's really nice of them to say. And I think that came down to the format. Having more interviews. It was only the case studies that we had as presentations. The rest of them were interviews or panels, which were moderated. And like you say, even the integrated panel, the regulator panel, the higher education panel, they were very much conversational rather than presentation. So I think that had a lot to do with it. But I think we can actually go better if we get rid of, it's actually, I don't want to use the term gross because it's not getting rid of stupid stuff. It's just getting rid of good stuff. Which is we'll probably have one less session per day for next conference because the cognitive demands was so high. And we are in talks with a comedian. I got to say, I find comedians amazing in how they're such good observers, and they're so good then at turning that into quite humorous anecdotes, which make us reflect on things. It helps us to identify the gross. I think that's what we're going to call the session. It's going to be the gross session where they help us to identify that stupid stuff that, it's really through the eyes of a comedian that we can kind of laugh at ourselves and go, oops, actually, when I go back to work, I probably should do something about that. So instead of making people cry, the idea is to emote laughter next time. But yeah, so I'll let you get back to what you want to see more of. But
sorry, Jason, I was asking Liz what she wants to see, not you.
I'm going to say
we've heard from you already.
But I just want to assure Liz, because we're still in negotiations with Liz's management about bringing her back for next year.
Yeah, well, that's my 12-year-old son who keeps wanting iPads and stuff. I think it'd be a PS5 or something.
So less, but I'm just going to say we're going to do more by doing less next time, just to help with negotiations, Liz, with your management. Yeah,
for the demands on you, Liz.
Yeah, you know what? That start of the second day, I was absolutely wiped. It's like, but I did sleep well, Joelle. So thank you. Look, I don't know. Jason's already answered the question, hasn't he? Really? So, but I think
no. What do you want to see more of? I said we're gonna subtract some stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to see more comedians. What do I want to see more of? I don't know what I want to see more of, honestly. I actually don't know what I'd like. I think I agree that it could have done with one less session a day. It was like everyone was, cognitive load. I think I've got your answers in my ear now, Jason. Honestly, I can't.
Sorry, Liz.
I can't. I'm
a terrible interviewer. Yeah.
There you go. Joelle will sort that out later. But I actually can't think of it. I did. I've not seen anything from another conference that I would say you've got to do this. So I think that's a compliment to what you conceived in terms of that conference. Like, I've never seen anyone do a live podcast recording. Like, that's insane. Like, that you must have
That
been
was my idea.
Was it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was like, who does that? Were you nervous doing that?
Do you know what? Because I've heard, so Adam Grant and Malcolm Gladwell do like they'll get together at a university venue and they'll record that as a live podcast, and I always really enjoy listening to those. So I was like, hey, what if we did that? So there it was.
Yeah, and it also came about, if you remember, Joelle, because we couldn't get Christina live. We could only get her virtual. And then how do we make that still authentic with her not in the room? And, you know, we came up with that idea as well. Like, that's also fed into it. Hey, we do all of our podcasts like we're doing with you now, Liz, virtually. You know, we could actually make it fairly authentic by doing that. And so we're really glad, Liz, that you found and other people found that it did feel quite natural despite her not being in the room at the time.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to say I was nervous, but I was curious on how it would go with the virtual one, because Michael obviously worked really well on the first day. But yeah, who I think it's more just keep their different up. Like, honestly, if you can create that same sense of belonging, multidisciplinary, definitely. I think more lower level job examples might be a good idea.
Yeah, so the like, obviously David Daniels talked about it, but Tony also talked about it, that yeah, a lot of the work that we do is really targeting what we would see as high status members of the workforce, where we know that people who would be classified as low status workers are actually at much greater risk of psychological injury, have less resources to actually be able to recover if they are injured, less recourse against their employers, all of that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I think that's a good call out, Liz.
Yeah, look, I can't remember where I got the data from, but I do remember reading something about, there's a lot of talk about executive stress, obviously, and I'm not saying that's not real, but I think I remember seeing some data, and I can't remember where from, in terms of, yes, it does exist, but it's not anything more than what other people in the organisation feel. And like you say, people at lower levels in the organisations maybe don't have the options that more senior people do. Like it's not a choice for some people to leave a job. You know, it's like they're fortunate to get the job. They might be doing 2 or 3 different jobs. So how do we look after these workers? So I think more lower level jobs would be a good thing. And then it would be, well, everyone was like, what's next? So I'm not sure what more than that, but I think, yeah, that more balance kind of, well, what are we doing for everyone else?
Yeah, and that's definitely in our notes, and we've got, you know, clients across manufacturing, retail, that sort of thing. So yeah, definitely I heard what David and Tony were saying about those lower status workers and trying to include them more. And yeah, we will want to give them a voice through some relevant case studies next year for sure. So that's definitely top of our mind.
Yeah, you could probably do something on the smaller businesses, you know, what Angela was saying as well, you know, actually get some case study from the small business. That would be interesting. Like, what is the level of knowledge in small business? I don't know. Angela will give you better ideas than me in that, but the smaller, that was a few of the questions, wasn't it? Okay, so it's all very good for Qantas and Rio to do this, and you've got resources to do it. How do we get it done on a smaller scale? I think people were looking for that angle as well.
Yeah, and I think look, that's problematic for a number of reasons. Like you say, small businesses often don't have the in-house expertise to be able to support them in doing this well. Also, the people in the room probably aren't employed by a small business as well, so they're not necessarily going to be able to take those learnings and apply them back in their own roles. If they're in a PNC or HR or health and safety role, they're probably in a company that is like probably not a small business, a medium to large at its smallest. Yeah. So, no, definitely thoughts crossed my mind, but I've also identified some problems with that sort of content as well. Yeah, no, look, we look, Liz, it's so gratifying to hear, because it has been about a year in the making, and probably something that Joelle and I have been talking about for 2+ years, going, how good would it be to run a conference and get the whole community together? So it was amazing to see how well it came together, how the community all came together. We had 400 people right across virtual and in person, which was amazing for our first conference. And just to see, like, I think I've liked, if I haven't liked your post on LinkedIn, I think I've liked every single one because I scroll it regularly, and it was just so awesome to see. And I even took screenshots and shared them with our team, those that aren't as avid on LinkedIn as what I am, to make sure that they were feeling the love as well. Because, there's so many people who were, peak happiness at the end of day one going, wow, this is amazing. I've just had a whole day on how do we improve work to improve mental health, rather than how do we make people more able to practice self-care, or what's a benefit that we can give to people to to help them improve their mental health. So they heard a whole day of that, and the bar was set very high. And to hear people like Mike Hagan, who we've had on the podcast recently, and others say, hey, day 2 may have actually even eclipsed day 1 in terms of the quality of the content. And so I just want to say for those listeners who are going, well, how the hell are they supposed to maintain that level over another 2 days of running a conference in 2025? Don't worry, I've already planned it. It's happening. We can maintain that level. Don't worry. It's to quote Captain America, I can do this all day. We have Joelle and I are humbled to be doing this podcast, right? And have created such a great network of people doing amazing stuff that we can call on it, and they all want to contribute to the discussion. So don't you worry. We've got a massive list of people who we think would be fantastic speakers, and next year's going to be amazing. 2026, 2027, equally amazing. So start booking it in your calendar, guys.
I hope you've taken a minute or two to just kind of let that sink in.
One minute, Liz.
1 minute. Liz. Oh, jeez.
I'm self-aware enough, Liz, to know that I don't celebrate enough, and the team probably needs to hear it. And look, I have expressed a lot of gratitude to the team and whatnot, but I'm it's probably pathological that I'm never happy with current status, and I'm always
and yet you do pat yourself on the back with a alarming degree of frequency.
Let's just say humility's. We talked about this today, Joelle. It's in both of our lesser strengths. But yeah, seriously, we're humbled to be a central part of this community. We're humbled to have been able to bring so many great people together. So much gratitude for all the people who did lend their voices, including yourself, Liz, to the conference. And again, we can't thank you enough for giving the right voice to the conference, and really capturing the tone that we're going for. And amazing feedback, Liz, for you.
Well, look, I do appreciate it. Thank you, Jason. I'm not even caught up on all the LinkedIn posts. I'll be honest. It's kind of like I've got my day job, I've got the kids, I've got sport at the weekend. It's like, oh my goodness, I'll get to all the LinkedIn posts. But no, look, it was a real pleasure. It was a real pleasure, and I think you blew me away when you said that you're planning for next year. Yeah, but there you go. That's probably why you're both as successful as you are. And look, I think you really should appreciate what you achieved. To get those speakers in the room was a massive achievement in itself. And I didn't even mention it earlier, the people, the expertise in the room that weren't even on the stage. Like, there was so much in that room, and that's why people were enjoying the networking, because it's like, there was such a wealth of experience, and it was incredible. So I think, both of you take a minute, just that 1 minute, to be to just kind of go, wow, that was something significant.
Yeah, I think once the venue's booked and everyone is lined up, then I'll enjoy the first conference. But you have to book these things well in advance, Liz. So and we have a board now at our company, so we need to seek board approval for big expenditures like conferences and that sort of thing. So I do need to put my budget request in. Our budget's going in for next year, so but we're almost there. I swear I've almost finished completely planning out next year's conference. So I can tell you it will be bigger and better. That's for sure. And so one of the really pleasing things was in the feedback that 91% of people who were polled. And we had quite good feedback. As you know, Liz, we're giving away fancy iPads to get people's feedback. but 91% of people said they plan to be back next year. So we started at 0 this year, got to 400. If we can start with 350 in the bank, then obviously we're going to need a bigger boat, as they say. So and that's what we're planning for.
There you go. Well, I better save the date. You can still talk to my 12-year-old about what gadgets you can throw his way.
Okay, yeah, 19th and 20th, and might even talk to your husband about what we can do for maybe the two of you as well. So yeah, that would be great. It's not about your 12-year-old. But hey, Liz, one of the questions, because you did rib me on stage about not being on the podcast despite having two other people before you. So the question we do like to ask our podcast guests at this stage of our podcast is, thinking into the future, what are your hopes for the future of workplace mental health?
Look, the bigger aim, isn't it, is in terms of treating psychological mental health, psychological, gosh, I'm getting tired at the end of the podcast, but psychological safety the same as physical safety. Like, that's the ultimate goal, isn't it? Like I think, I grew up in the northwest of England where there was physical harm all over the place in the workplaces. I'm sure it was the same in this part of the world, but when we can actually get on a par, I don't know if we'll ever fully get on, we might do, but the understanding and appreciation that psychological harm is on a par with physical harm, I think that would be the overall magnificent big goal. I like already how you've got, well, in the conference at least, multidisciplines working together, and I think that sends a really powerful message that can spread into different parts of workplace initiatives. So I think more of that, please. And I think just as we continue to see it, it becomes more the norm rather than the exception. So yeah, look, there's a long way to go, but the conversation started. People are learning from each other. Probably not too much more than that, but yeah, look, it's an exciting. We're just over the start of it, I think, and now I can imagine that it's going to grow and grow and grow. So more, please.
Yeah, and I feel, and many people have reflected on, they feel the conference was a real catalyst. It was real a lightning rod, and hopefully we get to see the ripple effects flow on from there.
Yeah, I would expect so. I think there was so much learning in that room. I can imagine the connections people made in that room were fantastic. I think it really did move things along.
All right, Liz, last question for you, and then you can go and have your glass of wine for the evening.
It's beer o'clock here, actually.
Beer o'clock? All right, good on you. What are your parting words for listeners who want to work in the field of psychological health and safety?
Well, look, we've done a few plugs for organisational psychologists as part of this podcast. Obviously, I'm really proud of that profession and encourage anyone to pursue it. But I don't think you need to be. I think as we just said, in terms of multidisciplinary, I think there's value from people from a lot of different backgrounds to work together. And so I guess it's just that collaboration. It's learning to work, and I'm doing that more internally. It's that learning to work across the system, collaborate, develop your relationships. And I think people from many different backgrounds can contribute. So work together, absolutely, and value different people's expertise, because it's not just a single easy answer. It's the creativity. It's like people in the role. There's so much diversity of thought and thinking that can actually get to the solutions. So I think anyone can get involved, really, if they kind of clue themselves up, and it doesn't matter what background you're from.
Yeah, and that's if I think back to all of the guests that we've had on this podcast and just the incredible range of backgrounds and sort of different professions and industries that they all work in, I think that's absolutely evidence that there are many pathways to get into this work, and absolutely finding the right people to collaborate with is absolutely a key to success.
And I think just on top of that is there are many pathways, but there are a lot of people not so informed as they were at the conference. So try to do a bit of your understanding. Well, they're listening to your podcast, so otherwise they won't get this message. But try to work out who actually does know what they're talking about rather than who talks very well.
Yes, an important warning.
Yes, confidence can sometimes trump competence. So, yes, that's words that David Burrows speaks regularly. So, probably a good message as well. Hey, Liz, I can't believe it took 200 plus episodes to get you on. I dare say we'll get in touch with your management and talk about not just booking you in for the conference, which will be, save the date, 19th and 20th of June of next year. But also we'll make sure that we do get you on the podcast straight after the conference again, because it's been so fantastic just, taking this time out. Like you say, we've taken a minute now, I feel, to really reflect and feel proud and humbled and all the rest of what we did achieve together to create that conference. So, it's good. And I hope the people who attended the conference get something out of this, the recap, and then the people who didn't. Hopefully you got severe FOMO, everyone, and that you start booking your trip for next year to, if hopefully you can make it in person, because like you say, Liz, being in the room was just so powerful. But, the virtual experience, we've got some ideas on that. How do we improve that again for the people who, for whatever reason, can't make it there?
Yeah, brilliant. I think you've probably convinced me to say book it in then.
Yes.
I know.
Yes, come on.
Oh dear, but look, it was a real privilege, and it's really nice working with you all. Really, really nice.
Awesome, Liz. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll get our people to talk to your people.
Thank you. Nice to chat to you both.
All right, listeners, well, that brings us to the end of this episode. Hopefully you enjoyed that discussion as much as we did. Remember to save the date, 19th and 20th of June for PHS Con 2025. That will be held again in Sydney. Remember, we do record these over video when we have the conversations with our guests, and you can catch this one and all 200 plus other episodes on the Flourish DX YouTube page. You can also find the short snippets of these discussions on the Flourish DX LinkedIn page. While you're over there, Liz, myself, and Joelle, we're all over there. So if you want to continue the discussion, if you want to book your next conference chair, I can tell you Liz's price just went up based on her recent experience. Totally worth whatever she is asking for, by the way. So thank you all, listeners. We will catch you next episode.
You've been listening to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. To stay up to date with the latest on psychological injury prevention, follow Flourish DX on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast at www.psychealthandsafety.com.